Greetings from Old Amsterdam. I'm here in the heart of the city, exploring all that Old Netherlands has to offer. And it's quite impressive, I might add. Now, you might be wondering, hey Cashin, why are you calling them Old Amsterdam and Old Netherlands? Is there a New Amsterdam and New Netherlands anywhere? Well, there aren't any such places today, but 400 years ago, the Dutch, like other European maritime nations, sponsored voyages that sent explorers around the world in search of new lands to conquer and colonize. In 1609, the Dutch East Indies Corporation sent Henry Hudson to North America to search for a passageway that would allow them to ship goods from Asia back to Europe via the Atlantic Ocean. As we know, there is no shortcut between the continents. But Hudson couldn't help noticing the potential that the land held for future settlements, and he noted this in his logs. Upon his return to England, Hudson passed his ship's logs and notes along to the Dutch ambassador. The ambassador immediately saw the potential and claimed a stretch of the mid-Atlantic seaboard in the name of his country. The new colony was christened New Netherlands, and it roughly encompassed the area we now know as Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware. The city which the first Dutch settlers founded on the tip of Manhattan Island was called, logically enough, New Amsterdam. Of course, nowadays we know the city is New York, and it's a part of the state of New York. How that change happened is a story for another day. But right now, I want to talk about the Netherlands, a small but mighty nation that has always punched above its weight, economically speaking. The Netherlands are situated on the northwestern edge of Europe alongside the North Sea. The country is bordered by Germany on the east and Belgium to the south. The countryside itself is distinguished by a mostly flat landscape crisscrossed by canals, agricultural areas, wetlands, woods, cities, and roadways for motor vehicles and cycling. This part of Europe is known as the, quote, Low Countries because much of the land is either at or below sea level. Maritime access, along with a very fertile landscape for agriculture, guarantees a measure of economic prosperity for the area from its very beginning. In the 1st century BC, the Roman Empire arrived in the southern portion of the country. They established a military post, but didn't attempt to invade or conquer the northern part of the country. They left the highly productive citizens alone, leaving the area peaceful and productive for about the next 4.5 centuries. In the early Middle Ages, Germanic and Frankish tribes invaded, and the Netherlands became a part of Charlemagne's empire for a time. After the fall of Charlemagne, the Low Countries area was carved up into several smaller states. The Netherlands had a long-established network of trading partners, so they were able to buy and sell agricultural and other goods not only throughout Europe, but also to Asia and North Africa. Remember that we're talking about roughly the 11th and 12th centuries now, so this was an insanely advanced level of economic development. It was also one of the stepping stones that turned the Netherlands into the first true global economic powerhouse. But money, it's always going to come back to money, doesn't it? It tends to attract the attention of people. The Habsburgs, the royal dynasty that ruled Austria from the late 13th century up until the early 20th century, were highly interested in their small neighbor to the northwest. In 1555, the Habsburg king, King Charles V, granted the Netherlands to his son, Philip II, King of Spain. One of the first things the new rulers tried to do was to levy new taxes onto the populace. The people, as you might expect, weren't too willing to turn their hard-earned wealth over to some faraway empire ruled by a Catholic monarch. The Dutch, you see, supported the Protestant Revolution and established their own national church, which was independent of the Church of Rome. A definite feeling of us versus them emerged. You might even call it the first stirrings of a true national identity. Long story short, rather than acquiesce and pay more taxes, the Dutch populace declared war against their Spanish rulers. And in 1581, the Netherlands declared independence from Spain, and by 1648, the Spanish finally relented. But the Netherlands was too tasty an economic prize to ignore, so the nation continued to battle other European powers to retain its sovereignty. And by 1814, after defeating the French, the Kingdom of the Netherlands was finally established. The people, as you might expect, weren't too willing to turn their hard-earned wealth over to a faraway empire ruled by a Catholic monarch. The Dutch, you see, supported the Protestant Reformation and established their own national church, which was independent of the Church of Rome. Historians and political economists often talk about the resilience and determination of the Dutch people. And these traits are probably the reason why the Netherlands was able to establish itself as an economic powerhouse from the very beginning. As the Dutch economy grew, its citizens began to amass quite a bit of personal wealth. The Dutch have never had a problem with earning money or growing wealth, but their money mindset is very much against public displays of wealth. The Dutch believe that money should be saved or invested, not spent to acquire possessions. When people with money saved meet business opportunities, markets are created. By the 16th century, Amsterdam was home to a thriving commodity exchange market where futures and options on grain and other agricultural products were bought and sold on a daily basis. But the Dutch economy was highly diverse, and agriculture represented only a slice of the pie. And an entirely new class of investment was created when the Dutch government issued a charter for an organization it called the Dutch East India Company. Let me give you some background on the circumstances that led to the creation of the company before I get into the investment aspect. By the 17th century, the Netherlands was already the dominant maritime power in Europe. The country had established a very lucrative trade with India, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka for luxury goods like tea and spices. In 1602, to protect Dutch trade dominance in East Asia and the Indian Ocean, the government chartered the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch government granted the company a 21-year-long maritime trade monopoly over the waters extending from the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa through the Straits of Magellan and between both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But a trade monopoly was only the starting point. The company was also empowered to negotiate treaties with native princes, raise and maintain its own military, build forts, and carry out all the administrative and legal duties of government. At this point, you may be thinking, okay, the government created a company and allowed it to be all-powerful. Is that a game changer? And the answer is that rather than creating just another quasi-government sponsored agency, the Dutch East India Company was chartered as a special type of partnership that was actually owned by its investors. An investor's share of ownership was directly related to the amount of their investment. So the more money you put in, the bigger your stake in the company. Are you still with me? Good. Investors in the Dutch East India Corporation were guaranteed a share of future profits. This promise, along with the 21-year government-sanctioned monopoly, turned what could have been a risky financial move into one of the greatest investment opportunities of all time. To ensure financial stability, the managing partners decided early on that they would not allow paid-in partners to withdraw their money. Investors who wanted to cash out and put their money elsewhere would instead have to sell their shares to another buyer in a new marketplace known as the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. The stock exchange was created as a marketplace for business investments, separate and apart from commodities exchange, which was the trading market for agricultural goods. One more fun fact about the Dutch East India Company. Once they were up and running, the managing partners decided against issuing new shares of stock. The number of shares offered when the company was created stayed fixed throughout the lifetime of the company. The sale of those shares, what we call its initial public offering today, attracted 1,143 investors and generated 6.5 million guilders. That works out to just over 600,000 US dollars in today's money. So with a solid market cap, the Dutch East India Company was open and ready for business. Its trade monopoly guaranteed that it was profitable from the get-go. As interest in the company grew over time, the law of supply and demand favored investors who were usually able to sell their shares at a premium. Remember that financial markets were in their infancy at this time, so no one could have predicted just how profitable this company would become just a few decades later. The tulip is the flower most often associated with the Netherlands. It is believed that the tulip was introduced to Northern Europe when Suleiman the Magnificent, ruler of the Ottoman Empire in the mid-16th century, sent tulip bulbs to Charles V, who was, as we mentioned, the Habsburg monarch ruling over much of Europe at the time. When it was discovered that tulips could survive often harsh weather conditions in the Low Countries, demand for the flower built quickly, then rose exponentially. Merchants in the Netherlands, who already had a well-established East Indies trade, lost no time adding tulip bulbs to the list of products for import. The flowers were so desirable and so lucrative that a single cargo load of tulip bulbs could yield traders a profit of 400% on a single voyage. Tulips rapidly became a must-have luxury for Northern Europeans. As their popularity grew, buyers began looking for flowers with different shades and different variations of color. Tulips with multiple colors, stripes, or streaks fetched a much higher price than single-hued bulbs. Demand escalated to a point where a single tulip bulb could sell for 10 times the amount of money that a working man earned in a year. The Dutch West Indies Company, owner of a trade monopoly and the sole supplier of tulips for the entire continent, was making money in ways that had never been seen before. And all those investors? Yeah, they were raking it in too. Since the company had fixed the number of shares available early on, the only way new investors could get a piece of the pie was to buy out an existing shareholder. And a lot of those shareholders were more than happy to sell to someone else for a very high price. Tulip Mania, as it's often called, was the world's first commodities bubble. As demand for tulips grew, so did the share for the Dutch East India Company. By 1637, the company's market cap had risen from its initial 6.5 million guilders to just over 77 million guilders. That's equal to about 8 trillion US dollars today. Or to put it another way, almost 4 times what Apple is worth today and about 6 times what Amazon or Google is worth right now in 2023. A speculative bubble in 1720 once again took the company's value on a roller coaster ride. Some historians believe that the bubble of 1720 was more financially destructive than Tulip Mania because it impacted stock markets in France and England long before Amsterdam got into the game. The company survived both bubbles, but by the end of the 18th century, its best days were already long gone. Growing administrative costs and scandals stemming from incidents of corruption and smuggling began to strangle the company financially. In 1799, the Dutch East India Company was formally dissolved. Recall that at the beginning of our discussion, I talked about the Dutch presence in North America. In 1621, as the Netherlands realized the economic potential the New World had to offer, they chartered the Dutch West India Company in hopes that they could repeat the financial success of the Dutch East India Company on the other side of the world. The West India Company was charged with opening trade, building forts, and maintaining a presence throughout North and South America. The Netherlands' arch enemy, the Spanish, aka the Habsburgs, had already made significant inroads throughout the Americas. The possibility of vanquishing the Spaniards once again must have been a very strong incentive for the Dutch to set up shop on that side of the Atlantic. Similar to its sister corporation, the West India Company was granted a 24-year monopoly on trade across a region stretching from Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada down all to North America, through the Caribbean, and along South American continent to the Straits of Magellan. The West India Company's charter also included trading rights between West Africa and North America, giving the company the exclusive right to import slaves into colonial America. The Dutch West India Company was never as successful as the East India Company. This was partly due to the competition. The English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese had already explored and established colonies across the Americas. From the 16th to the 18th centuries, the Dutch had been at war almost continuously with one or more of these nations. And by 1664, the Dutch had lost the New Netherlands, their largest settlement in North America, to the English. After additional territorial losses, it became apparent that the West India Company could not defend their settlements. In 1792, the Dutch government bought up all shares of stock and formally dissolved the West India Company. While the East and West India Companies were two of the most lucrative and profitable organizations on earth during their heyday, they were merely one element of the Dutch financial sector. The Netherlands had always been a wealthy nation. Its people and government had plenty of monetary assets available to pay bills, save, and invest. From the late 16th century to the late 18th century, an era known as the Dutch Republic, a robust financial industry with both public and private elements developed an array of financial products available to anyone with money to invest. On the public side, the Dutch government levied taxes and floated several different types of public bonds at the local, provincial, and national level. This helped to fund the development of a national infrastructure. Dutch merchant houses became the precursor to what we now know as merchant banks. Dutch financiers began to underwrite public offerings of foreign government bonds in Dutch capital markets. In 1778, Dutch bankers granted John Adams, who was living in the Netherlands as the U.S. envoy, a $2 million line of credit, which allowed our new nation to begin paying down the debt it incurred during the Revolutionary War. The Dutch were clearly ahead of their time in terms of financial savvy. But by the end of the 18th century, the Dutch Republic found itself burdened with a high level of public debt at a time when their country's gross domestic product was also declining. England, always a rival in economic and military matters, was on the upswing at this time. As London established itself as a new international capital market, merchant bankers left the Netherlands for England. As its financial sector withered, the Netherlands entered the 19th century as a shadow of its former self. During this time, its economy became less reliant on industry and commerce and more reliant on agricultural and commodity products. It took the Dutch government years to liquidate its public debt, restore its credit, and once again become a power player in the world's economy. In 1848, a new Dutch constitution ushered in governmental reforms and laid the basis for its present system of parliamentary democracy. The monarch remained as head of state, but governmental policies would now be handled by a prime minister and other cabinet ministers. Parliamentary reforms gave elected leaders the right to amend bills and hold legislative hearings. Individuals were given increased political and civil rights, including freedom of assembly, privacy correspondence, freedom of religion, and freedom of education. The political stability and additional freedoms afforded by the new constitution helped the Netherlands get back on its feet, economically speaking. When World War I broke out in 1914, the nation chose to remain neutral. This decision spared the country from the kinds of losses associated with direct involvement. However, it did not mean that the Dutch people escaped unscathed. Other European trading partners, most notably Germany, were nearly decimated by the war, causing commerce to grind to a halt. By the 1920s, the Netherlands economy was in a depression which lasted until about 1925. The following decade, as the Great Depression swept through and across Europe, the Americas, the Dutch government hoped that the new economic crisis could be resolved through international cooperation. This preference led to the government adopting a mostly hands-off economic policy as a way to ensure a balanced national budget and prevent the devaluation of its currency. The Dutch strategy was the total opposite of the more involved Keynesian approach that nations like the US or England were taking at the time. The result was an ongoing perfect storm of bad economic news. Poverty levels and consumer prices shot up while employment, trade, and the flow of capital tanked. Economic recovery didn't begin to take hold until 1936, when the Netherlands finally agreed to abandon the gold standard. Once this step had been taken, the Dutch stock market began to rise again, commercial trading resumed, and unemployment began to recede. By 1939, the Dutch government began to fund large-scale public work projects in the hopes of making the post-war years of depression a memory. But as we now know, the world wasn't done fighting quite yet. In 1940, Germany invaded the Netherlands, and the Dutch economy pivoted away from infrastructure and trade and moved full on into a wartime economy. Today, the Netherlands is once again an economic power to be reckoned with. They are the 15th largest economy in the world in terms of gross domestic product and the 5th largest economy in the European Union. Dutch workers earn generally high wages for their labor, and the country as a whole enjoys one of the lowest poverty rates in the world. The nation's private, free market economy is both diverse and highly regulated. However, the government does play an active role in economic development by offering subsidies to stimulate job creation in underdeveloped areas. During the 1980s, several state-owned companies such as KLM, the national airline, and DSM, the Dutch state mines, were privatized. The country is now more highly industrialized than ever before. Its heritage, industries of agriculture, and fishing still exist, but they account for a smaller percentage of the overall economy. The Dutch remain a world leader in dairy production, and much of their produce for export is now hydroponically grown. Dutch-grown tulips and other flowers are still desired commodities and are easily afforded by consumers today. The Netherlands had also carved out a place for itself in the energy sector, producing oil and natural gas from offshore fields in the North Sea. Iconic Dutch windmills stand alongside modern wind turbines, allowing the Netherlands to grab a slice of the renewable energy pie. About 20% of the Dutch labor force works in manufacturing, producing textiles, chemicals, metals, electronics, and food and beverage products for export. Finance and commercial banking is still an important component of the Dutch economy. A major concern for the financial sector nowadays is the trend towards mergers and centralization. Financial technology, or fintech, offers the potential for ongoing innovation in this industry. The Dutch have been exploring how to move towards a cash-free economy over the last few decades. No nation has been able to make that leap just yet. But if such a thing is possible, my hunch is that the Dutch will lead the way. Let's wrap up with a final look at one of the defining characteristics of the Dutch mindset about money and finance. Earlier, we mentioned that the Dutch have no problem with earning money or having money, but their culture believes that living large is both wasteful and ostentatious. This is a mindset that might sound familiar to a lot of people from the US Midwest. It's probably not a surprise to learn that area was a magnet for Dutch immigration in the 19th and early 20th century. The Dutch values of resilience, industriousness, social responsibility, education, and tolerance provide as good a foundation for personal financial success as any I know. But beyond the world of money, and yes, there's more to life than money, these values can also provide a roadmap for a life well lived. Our finances are an important aspect of life, but they are just one piece of the fuller mosaic that includes the work we do, the people we care about, the place we live, and the activities we enjoy. All right. Well, thank you, first and foremost, for taking the time to do this. I want to just kind of further explain what it is that we're doing. So I'm doing like an international personal finance video series.
Yeah.
I went to several
Okay.
countries and, I recorded in those countries talking about the fiscal and monetary policy of the country
Mm-hmm.
from the country's inception today. And I want to kind of also look at it through the lens of personal finance. So I did my best to get interviews with folks that were just walking around, asking them, questions about how they grew
Yeah.
up with money, their formal education around money, if that existed, and then make some generalizations about how people in X country handle money. Are you guys generally
Okay.
savers? Are you spenders? Use
Mm.
credit, like those different types of things, so that
Yeah.
the primary audience for the series are Americans. They can look at how Americans traditionally
Yeah.
do things compared to the Dutch or the Italians or the French or the Germans, etc.
Mm. Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah, so
Let's do it.
that's what we're doing today.
Let's do it. I could talk about personal finance. I mean, I don't know if I could talk about like a lot of things in details when it comes to taxes and everything. I'm not an expert on
Right.
that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't expect you to go into all of that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Cool.
mainly just like how did you grow up with it? How do your friends handle
Yeah.
money? All the rest. Okay,
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
cool.
Let's
All right.
go.
So first, if we could start off with an introduction of yourself.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so my name is Ghislaine, also sometimes known as Shine. I am 32, born and raised in the Netherlands. My parents are from the amazing country in South America called Suriname. And yeah, I do a lot of things here in the Netherlands. I'm an entrepreneur. I come from an entrepreneurial family, and yeah, I get to do a lot of fun things every single day, and also regarding finances. So this is a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you, Shine. How long have we known each other now? Like 2 years?
What? Yeah, we've known each other. Yeah, I think 2 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
That's crazy. Time's flying. But yeah,
I know it flies.
you live in a beautiful part of the world.
I do. I love Europe.
Yeah.
You know, it's everyone has their opinion about Europe, but I actually do like living in the Netherlands. There are a lot of great things here. Obviously, there are things that I feel like we can definitely improve on.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm happy to live in the Netherlands. Very grateful. Yeah, except for the cold. It's very cold in here.
And where have you been in the United States?
I've been to Florida, so Miami, and I have been, let's see, I've been in, was it? Yeah, I went to Dallas.
Dallas,
Yeah,
Texas. Yeah.
Dallas. Yeah, I went. No, sorry, I went to Austin.
Oh, you went to Austin, Texas. Okay.
I went to Austin, Texas. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, as a Georgian, we gladly welcome you to come visit us in Atlanta and Savannah and all the other great places in this state. It's a great place. I have been fortunate enough to call this place home. So the next time you're here,
I
please,
know.
and I'm sure you're going to be stopping through Atlanta. Please, have a little
I know.
longer
I
there.
want to. I
Yeah,
want to. Everyone says you should visit Atlanta. So yeah,
it's
I
a
want
beautiful
to
place. Okay,
next
perfect.
time.
Perfect. So I want to really just kind of jump right in with a couple of questions, have a
Yeah.
conversation about it. So the first question is, how was money viewed in your family growing up?
In my family growing up, it wasn't as taboo as a lot of other families or a lot of other people may have grown up with money. My
Mhm.
mom was always very honest, my dad as well, when it came to money, when it came to working, saving, investing, giving, money away to charity or anything like that. So for me, it was a very yeah, it was an easy subject. Like I could always ask my mom or my parents for advice or anything like that. So that was, yeah, it's very positive for me and how I
Okay.
viewed money. Yeah.
And would you say the preponderance of the things that you learned about money came from your parents?
100%. I think when it came to the value of money and how to go about it, definitely my mom was a really good influencer on that side because when I was 14, 15, she was like, listen, you have to go to work. You got to do something.
Yeah.
So she was like, okay, you do whatever you want to do. But so I ended up being like a paper, delivering papers to different homes. And so she taught me how to, because when I got my little salary every month, she taught me how to use that in a wise way. So more how to save, how to, spend something, do something fun for yourself, how to give something away, and how to just kind of handle money. So for me, like definitely my mom was a big part of that, making sure that I knew how to handle money the right way.
And does your mom
Yeah.
have a background in personal finance, or is this something that she just
No,
learned through? Okay.
not not at all. So that's why sometimes I'm like, okay, well, how did she get to the place where she knew how to handle money? Maybe also because, as a single mom, she had to juggle a lot of jobs. So she
Mm-hmm.
couldn't afford. You either have two decisions. Either you make very bad decisions and that will reflect on your family. In this
Mm-hmm.
case, my mom tried to make the right decisions when it came to finance because in her mind, she was like, okay, I want to move forward in life. So therefore, I have to make decisions that are the right decisions for me, but also for my child in order for my child to have a better life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for her, it was more of the mindset of I don't want to be like, where maybe my mom or my dad was, even though they worked very hard. And I don't get to hear a lot of stories from my grandparents in terms of how they handled money. But what I did know is that my granddad and my grandmother, they were really hard workers and they had to
Mm-hmm.
take care of a very big family. So yeah, so I think my mom wanted to push that further, wanted to do better for herself and then for me as her child. So that's I think the reason why she made better decisions when it came to money.
Okay. No, I mean, that definitely makes sense. Would you
Yeah.
say that as you were growing up and making friends, that your friends also had that influence coming from their parents, or how do you think your friends were taught about
Yeah.
money and stuff like that?
I think in that case, I would be a little bit of a unicorn because
Mm-hmm.
when I came to my friends, it was very different. And it's
Mm-hmm.
still very different. When I talk to my friends, when it comes to money, finances, also entrepreneurship, they weren't really raised with that mindset. So I have a lot of friends around me. I think most of my friends, they didn't really have the parents that taught them how to manage money and your personal finance as well. And that resulted in also maybe some debt or making other decisions that I didn't make. So yeah, in that case, I could definitely see that that was a huge benefit and a blessing that I had those parents that taught me to make better decisions.
Okay. And, I think about this a lot. I think I have a similar experience in certain ways in terms of how I was brought up to look at money and how
Yeah,
my friends were brought up. But kind of switching gears a little bit, when you watch the news in the Netherlands, I'm curious to hear how different it is, or if it's not that much different than when I watch the news here in the United States. And when they talk about personal finance, it's usually about the student loan debt burden on X, Y, and Z
mm,
generation. It's about credit card balances and how folks are spending, significantly more using credit cards and holding balances. It's
yeah,
about interest rates on mortgages and do young people have the ability to get a home in this economy and to
yeah,
purchase a car and all the rest and vacation. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective in the Netherlands, are you
yeah,
hearing stuff like this? What is it like? Do you feel like you're able to get ahead and buy a home and vacation and do all the rest?
yeah. I think it was very different a few years ago. When I grew up, it wasn't as talked about as much when it came to student debt or anything like that. It's very different from America, the Netherlands, because in America, the fees to go to college are extremely, extremely, like just insanely high. For us, that's very, very different. So for us, maybe you pay, well, there is a rule that when you finish your education when you have like a certain level, when you finish your education, you don't even have to pay your college debt back because then
Mhm.
can be seen as a gift. But then higher education, and then actually loaning a bit more money, then yes,
Mm.
yeah, then you have to definitely pay that back. So in terms of college debt, when you look at America, you that's like like I don't even know what the numbers are. Maybe sometimes 100K, 120 to 200,000. Like those are maybe like those numbers probably. Maybe in the Netherlands, for us, that's already high. When we talk about maybe $10,000 in student debt or $15,000, that's for us. That's very
Yeah.
high. So I have friends that have like 10K, 20K, maybe 25K in debt, but that's, I think, in comparison to America, that's very, very different. That's like very low. But then fast forward to now, what I can see now when it comes to young people is that we talk about it way more than we did in the past. So now we are actually going through, I would say, an age where you have a lot of young people who are in debt, and not only because of student debt, but
Mhm.
also because of just personal debt, just making different decisions, which make yeah, which make them go into debt. And then on top of that, you have this thing called peer pressure, and
Mhm.
people wanting to buy stuff, and then you have the social media age and the digital age where you compare yourself to other people, and you compare yourself to the 23-year-old that already has like big things going on in his life, a Ferrari or whatever, you see that on the internet, and then they want to have that same lifestyle, so they make different decisions. So that's then they have like not only student debt, but then maybe some personal debt. So we see a lot of that right now when it comes to young people. A lot of it. A lot of young people are
Mhm.
struggling with their personal finances. I actually had a conversation with a few young people, and then I asked them a question. Hey, do you think how do you look at the future? And then one person actually said, honestly, I don't know if I will be able to buy myself a home within the next 5 or 10 years. I don't know if I'm ever gonna be a homeowner. So yeah, these are definitely the subjects that young people are talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds similar. It's just different scales. Because you're absolutely
Different
right. When
skills,
you look at
yeah.
student loan debt balances in the United States, they are very quickly approaching $100,000. And the only
Yeah,
reason why they aren't higher is because our public schools are significantly lower than our private schools. But it is
yeah,
not outside of the norm if someone goes to a
yeah,
private institution for them to come out with, $150,000 to $200,000 in student loan debt
yeah,
for a 4-year degree. Um,
yeah, that's crazy.
it is crazy.
Yeah.
But I wanna in that same vein talk about potential earning, right? So in the United States, the earning potential for someone coming out of school in like a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, like a medical field or something like that, it is significantly high. So if you're
Okay,
coming out of
yeah.
school post residency, you're making 150, depending on the
Mm,
discipline, 250, $350,000.
yeah.
So depending on the degrees you're going for, you could end up in a situation where your earning potential more than pays for the
Mm,
education that you pay for, and then you can start to
yeah.
invest and do all the other things. So can you talk to me about like what on average the earning potential is for someone who gets that bachelor's degree? They come out with $10,000, $15,000 in debt, but what does their earning
Mm.
potential look like?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how it works in America, but then we have like a starter, like base salary when you are kind of like new in the field, when you don't have a lot of experience. So I don't know what the contract negotiations are in America where you can just get yourself a very great salary. I think in
Hmm.
the Netherlands, unless you have a great network of
Hmm.
people or a good review, maybe yes. But if you maybe are, and I don't know about STEM because I don't know a lot about those different jobs. But what I do know is that, a lot of times when you just are coming from school, just got your diploma, yeah, you'll get like the base salary, first.
Hmm.
Unless you are very good with negotiating and unless you have a great network, just like I said, or you just have balls to make sure that you have a great contract. Otherwise, we would love to in the Netherlands save as much as we can
Yeah.
if you don't speak up. So it's not really, how can I say it? Don't assume that when you get your college degree that you'll get a great salary right after. I have a
Mhm.
friend and I think she's in tech. So, and she has a student debt. Well, she earns okay now, but the first few years, like definitely no, and she still has her student debt. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know about that. You have to just gain more experience and then just have bigger balls to get a greater salary, I guess.
Would you say that that base salary that you referred to is coming from the government, or is that coming from the private sector, more or less agreeing that entry-level folks are going to earn X? Or is it the government mandating that there's a minimum wage or like a livable
Yeah,
wage?
we do have a minimum wage, but we also have a lot of, and I don't know how you guys have this, but we have like these sector, like the bonds. I don't know how you call that in English. It's kind of
Mhm.
like you have an association that is kind of controlling what people should be earning in specific sectors.
Unions.
Unions, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So we have unions for everything, almost in the Netherlands. I think maybe in tech we don't really have unions, but in most sectors we have unions. So
Mm.
those unions decide the scale of the salary that you can go from when you're a starter to when you can move yourself up. So for instance, my mom, she's in childcare, and so we have a union for that. And so every year they basically publish another year of contract of the union that kind of decides what the salaries are going to be for everyone. Depends on their skills. And of course, you have room as an employee to, negotiate for a higher scale. But yeah, you have your base scale, what we definitely have to give, and what the max can be for one particular scale. And then sometimes you can go to another scale and to another scale and to another scale. So yeah, so that's kind of how it works. We work with a lot of unions and people love it and some people hate
Yeah,
it.
that's very different than how we do things
Yeah,
in the United States because there are a lot of right
yeah,
to work states. Georgia's a right to work state, and then there are other states that are much more welcoming of unions.
yeah,
So yeah, that's cool to hear though, and I'm sure that perspective is shared by people in the United States in terms of unions having
yeah,
an outsized role in assisting people with having that livable wage and certain skills.
yeah.
So okay.
Yeah, some people don't like unions because it's kind of like, oh, you guys are deciding for me kind of what mid to max range I should be earning, yes or no. And where you have like other sectors or other specific jobs where you don't have unions, you can just negotiate a great salary. But
Mhm.
some people love it because at least it gives them, they feel like they have more right as an employee. because it's not only about the skills when you talk about unions, it's also about how you should treat your employee, what to
Mm,
do with sick, with when you're sick, how much do you get paid when you're sick or when you're on leave or when something happens to a family member or when you pass away. There are these rules that kind of we have to abide by as an employer when someone, yeah, when you have all of these instances, we have to go kind of abide by the government and by these union rules. So it's
I get it.
protecting also the employer in some ways.
I get it. I get it. Very cool. So my next question is about formal education. And so I'm
Hmm.
interested to hear what formal financial literacy you received in school or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a hard one. I feel you, I mean, you get your basic economics, but then the economics are more around the economics, just know like about the country and a
Hmm.
little bit of the rules of the country in terms of
Hmm.
like economically. But when it comes to personal finances, you don't really hear a lot of that. And that's kind of my problem with our school system, that we don't really get a formal get education on personal finances. It's more about just economics and just your basic mathematics and all
Hmm.
that, but not necessarily on, I think, real life issues. Yeah, you don't really get an education about that unless maybe you're in a when you do a financial education, maybe. But when it comes to just your normal everyday student that gets their education here in the Netherlands, yeah, those subjects I feel like we can be way better at talking about.
Interesting. Okay. We have a similar situation where it's not in a lot of kindergarten to 12th grade
Yeah.
schools. It's not really in the
Mm,
curriculum. I think certain states are
no.
doing better than other states there, but I'm always a huge proponent of increasing the financial literacy and IQ,
Yeah.
especially at the much younger ages, and then continuing that education as they progress.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
but we have someone here, I think one of the bigger names, Dave Ramsey, teaches financial
Mm,
peace. Like, do you
yeah.
guys have an equivalent? Seems like you're familiar. Do you guys have an equivalent to
Yeah.
him?
Ooh, I mean, I do know Dave Ramsey. I follow him as well. Honestly, I don't know. I don't really, I mean, I know a lot of people that talk about financial literacy. I know a lot of people who work with schools within their own organization to help young people when it comes to financial literacy. I know a lot of organizations that help people when it comes to that, or young people when it comes to that. But is there like a Dave Ramsey? I don't think so, to be honest.
Okay.
And if he is out there or she, then I would love to get to know about this person, but I don't think so. Maybe I haven't searched enough, but yeah, I don't think so.
Well, maybe it's okay because the power of social media, our Dave Ramsey is your Dave Ramsey. So,
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah.
okay. So my next question is, what would you tell your younger self about how to handle money? I love this question. I really love this question because you could come
Ooh.
at this from a bunch of different ways, right?
You know what? It's a hard one for me because I literally never really worried so much about money. So I think my younger self was very confident in money or in handling money just because my parents were super just, yeah, helpful when it came to that. So I just never really worried about money. So the only thing that I do can tell myself is just don't make unnecessary investments. Yes, that's what something that I've definitely have done. But also in that, like I think I'm just very fortunate to have been able to handle money the right way. So when I traveled, I just always listened to what my mom and dad told me. My dad actually told me from a very young age to not take a loan out from anyone. And if I want to lend money, then it always has to be my parents. But I never actually took a loan out in my life. I've never done that. Yeah, except
And,
for the mortgage that I have right now in my
and
home. But that's the only loan that I have.
and you're saying that that's abnormal. Like your friends
Yeah.
aren't doing that. Your friends are living, and people like
Yeah,
in your age range.
people, yeah, for sure, for sure. When it comes to student loans, or just give you a small example, I have a friend right now, and she actually, well, she loaned money to, sorry, is it
Mhm.
lend money or loan? Yeah, she lent money to her friend, and that was about 3,000 euros. That was 6 months ago or even more, and she still hasn't really paid anything back. So, and now, and these are two friends. You think that, oh, okay, I'm gonna, give you some money and then you give it back. Well, this person it's very interesting because this person who knows that she has to pay something back is actually going on a trip in a few months for her birthday. So this is what I'm talking about. A lot of people just ask for money for, oh, I just need a holiday, or I need to buy these shoes, or I need to do my hair, or I need to do this, and they don't know how to handle that. So it's just very easy to just ask people for money or loan money. Yeah, my dad would be so mad at me if I would do those things. So I've just never done those things.
I gotta say, it's comforting in an odd way to hear that the
Yeah.
lack of shame transitions across the pond, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
Americans
yeah.
do that, Dutch folks do that, Italians do it,
Yeah.
Germans do it. That's just a thing that people do.
A human thing. A
It's a
human
human
thing.
thing. So,
Yeah.
okay, on the subject of of debt, credit,
Mm.
leasing
Yeah.
cars versus financing versus paying them off, mortgages, would you
Yeah.
say, just based on the news that you're watching, and the conversations that you're having, that people are
Mm.
purchasing things with credit, or they're much more, let me just save up the cash and purchase it when I have the cash?
Yeah. So let me talk about two things. One, you have pay later, and the other one, you have the credit card. So
Mhm.
I think the culture in America very much is surrounded by credit card, credit card, credit card. People have multiple credit cards probably in the States. In the Netherlands, it's very different. You have people that have credit cards, but a lot of people don't have credit cards. So that's something very different from American culture. We are not really into, okay, you having a lot of credit cards and paying your stuff by credit card. I think a lot of people, when they purchase a credit card, is usually when they make international trips, and sometimes it's easier to then use a credit card. I have a credit card, for instance, but I know a lot of people who don't have it. You have another thing coming that has been coming up for the past few years is where you can now buy something on a website or online shop or anything like that, and then you can pay later. Now that's
Mm,
something that's kind of like the new credit card thing, where
mhm.
you just pay later, and a lot of people don't know how to handle that. I have, for instance, have used it sometimes, but I know that I pay it right back because I do have the finances. And sometimes, you pay it later so that you can maybe try things on, and then if it doesn't work out, then you can send it back. Those are mostly my reasons. But a lot of people buy stuff and they ask, or they click the button pay later, and they actually don't have the money. So, that's what we are getting into right now. And that's what I see with a lot of young people. They kind of like the disease of the paying later system. I don't know what kind of systems you guys have that, or what those things are called, but for us, it's the companies like Klarna, or you have like a few other ones. So they basically, yeah, it's kind of horrible for a lot of young people because they just buy stuff and they don't know how to pay it back. So yeah, and then when it comes to mortgages, yeah, it's insane. I think a lot of people, when it comes to mortgages and when it comes to home ownership, they are very much not motivated to buy a home because it's just really expensive. The market is skyrocketing right now. Mortgage rates are just up. It's insane. So a lot of people, especially when you're a starter or when you're alone, it's very hard for you, very, very hard for you to buy a home.
What are interest rates right now for mortgages?
Ooh, that's a great question. So mine was 1.4%.
Oh,
Is that's very low?
yeah, there's
Yeah, that was
7% here right now.
yeah, I think now we are in the 3 to 4%. That's for
Mhm,
us very high. Yeah, I think for
mhm.
us, but I might be a little bit wrong, but that's kind of what it is right now. So it's definitely yeah, it's crazy. So a lot of people are definitely not interested in buying a home right now unless you have unless you have a very, very good job and you have maybe a partner and you can buy a home for yourself, or you live alone and you have a very great salary so that you can actually purchase a home. But it's just very hard right now. So yeah,
Right now, the average home value in the United States is a little over $400,000. Would you happen to
yeah.
know what that number is in the Netherlands?
Are you talking about like kind of the
Just the
homes or like
average, like a three-bedroom, two-bath home in the Netherlands. Right now, I think it's like $420,000.
yeah, I think for us definitely in the 350. Yeah.
350. Okay.
Yeah, 350. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
For
Um,
us it's bad. I bought my house for 265 and that was already high for me.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, now it's
And
crazy.
do you guys have the same loan terms? We have a 30-year fixed
Yeah,
mortgage
you have
here.
30 or 40.
So there you have 30 and 40?
Yeah,
And is the
30 or
interest
40.
rate
Yeah.
variable or is it fixed? Like, is it 1.4 for 40 years or is it 1.4 now? But if interest rates go high, then it'll increase. And if they go
No,
low,
you can get a fixed rate. Yeah. So I mean I got a fixed rate, thank God.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's for a lot of people, even that is it's just crazy right now. So yeah.
I love real estate. So I love asking questions about
No, that's
real
okay.
estate. So you have a 30, 40-year term, relatively low interest rate. Do you guys have credit scores?
You know, that's something that it's a very, I think, American thing. I don't think we work with credit scores because that's no, what is exactly the credit score? How do you so that I can know if
So
we have this in the Netherlands?
there are several different elements that contribute to a FICO
Mm,
score.
mm,
What is it? Fair Isaac credit, something like that. But the FICO score ranges from like 300 to 850. So your
mm,
score, that three-digit number, varies between that range, and obviously the higher the
mm,
better. And so in the
mm.
United States, usually you have to have like a 640 to be eligible for a lot of things. Anything over 720 gets you
Yeah,
prime like interest rates, and then when you're in the 800s, you're considered to have a very good credit
yeah.
score. And the things that are
Okay.
contributing to that score are payment history, different lines of credit. So do you have a mortgage or do you have a
Yeah,
personal loan? Do you have credit cards, revolving and
yeah,
installment type credits, student loans, things like
yeah.
that. The age of the account, how long have you had credit? Did
Mm,
you open it back in 2010? So now you have 15 years of history, or did you open it
yeah,
back in 2023 so you only have 2 years of history? All of these different variables factor into that three-digit FICO score, which
yeah.
determines the interest rate you get on whatever debt you're trying to take out. Do you have
Yeah.
anything similar to that?
We don't have credit scores. What we do have, we have kind of like like a Dutch credit. We call it a Dutch credit registration office,
Hmm.
where basically they do keep track of like the loans that an individual have. So what they do is they see if they have a lot of loans or mortgage or other financial products, like maybe having like, your phone or something like that, or outstanding debts. That's also a thing, or missed payments, then you are not eligible to maybe then buy a home or do anything like that. So we don't necessarily work with a credit score, but this registration, they do check what your kind of your personal finance, how that right now is, if you have any debts or any like that, anything like that. Yeah.
Okay.
They call
Cool.
it
Cool, cool.
BKR in the Netherlands. So it's kind of the Bureau
BK,
of Credit Registration.
BKR.
BKR is, yeah, so but you could also say DCR, Dutch Credit Registration Office. So they check kind of like, yeah, they check basically or they assess, I would better say they assess the person's credit worthiness. That's what they kind of do.
Okay.
So when I bought my home, I had to pay off my phone. Otherwise I couldn't get a mortgage. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
When you bought your home, you had to pay off
Mhm.
your phone, or else you couldn't get
Yeah,
a
when
mortgage.
yeah, sorry, otherwise I couldn't get a mortgage. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they checked that. So that was my only outstanding loan, even though I don't even see buying your phone or having like how do you call it? Like every month you pay off your phone, right? But they would see that as a loan, or as an outstanding debt. So I had to pay off my entire phone, my iPhone, and then I could basically get the mortgage to buy my home.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. The last question that I have for you is,
Mhm.
looking back, what financial lessons from your childhood have stuck with you the most?
Don't loan anything from strangers or people that you don't know.
Hmm.
Be very wise in how to handle your money and knowing the difference, or knowing kind of how to manage your money in terms of saving, in terms of getting something, or keeping something for yourself, but also in terms of giving away. My mom always taught me that. Not make unnecessary investments, especially when you're an entrepreneur. Sometimes you think about level 100 while you are at level 5. And sometimes you then make decisions, financial decisions, based on, oh, this is where I want to be in 5 years or 10 years. So I'm already going to do this. And sometimes it's unnecessary. So you make unnecessary financial decisions that will actually, well, it can have some negative impact on you. So those are the things that I've definitely have been taught. What else have I been taught? As a child, you mean as well,
Yep.
or as a child? Also, just the value of generosity. You know, what generosity also can do for you in your finances. So, you know, a lot of times I've seen that sometimes when I was very generous, then you also receive certain things back. So yeah, so definitely also a part of finances, personal finances, what my mom has taught me has also been about being a generous person in everything that you do. But then also the other side is not to for people to misuse that and to be
Hmm.
very wise in how and in who you allow who you allow in your space, and especially when it comes to finances, who you allow. So yeah, yeah, those are I think probably the lessons that I've been taught.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right.
This has been a great
Thank you.
interview. I'm sure everybody who ends up watching this video will have learned something, looking at their own personal
Yeah.
situation, and then kind of looking at what folks in the Netherlands are going through in terms of their personal financial journeys. So,
Thank you.
mhm,
Appreciate. Thank you for having me on.
absolutely. Until next time.
Thank you. All right. Bye bye.
Bye.